Right, hi students. So I am going to explain to you for this week's lecture how to put together a portfolio of evidence. So a portfolio of evidence, the best way to think about it is to imagine you're being summoned to the court and you have to provide evidence for something that you are being found guilty of. I don't know, speeding. And so you have to come and provide evidence that one, it is your car, that you were in the car, that you were speeding, and if you've got alternative motives, i.e. Evidence that you weren't present, then you would need to provide that evidence. So for me to provide a graph of Kolb or Gibbs, that's not evidence of my evidence in a court of law. All right? So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and give you an example using one particular scenario in terms of evidence, and we're going to create a bit of a court here in front of us. And I'm going to try and show you using that analogy of a courtroom how to present evidence. But here's the very important thing about evidence. Evidence is inappropriate if there's no context. So in other words, again, if I'm in a court of law because I have to justify speeding, that I am innocent, I'm not going to provide you evidence of how well I can cook and give you certificates of my cooking license. It's got nothing to do with speeding. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to create a context, and then I will provide evidence to that context. So the context is like a hook, and the evidence is like this jacket. And so I'm providing you with evidence, but the context is like a hook on the wall. If I don't have the context and I provide you with evidence, it's not going to stick. It's not going to stand. It's not going to achieve anything. So what I need to do is I need to create a hook, the context upon which I will hook my evidence. Okay? So bear with me. We're going to go into a courtroom. I'm going to create hooks upon which I'm going to place my evidence. And that's exactly what you're doing in terms of a portfolio of evidence. So here we go. Welcome to the PPDI courtroom. Good morning, Judge. I am here today to present to you evidence of leadership. So let me just put you into the picture, Judge, as an opening statement. I've always been involved in leadership. In fact, if I remember far back in the 1980s, doing children's camps and so on, one of the key things that was instilled in me was you lead by example. So character leadership is something that's always been a part of my own leadership development. But Judge, a very interesting thing in relation to the case before us today is that in my jobs, leadership has always been part of my job role. So when I've taken on jobs, leadership just came as part of it by default. But in this project, with my colleagues, with my fellow students, we're all equals. And so as the project starts, one of the tasks that we have as a group is to elect a leader. So as I've written up my learning contract, Judge, and allow me to present you with evidence one, my learning contract, I wanted to not just be appointed a leader, because I can't be, I'm equal with my peers. I wanted to be elected a leader. So one, I wanted to be assertive in communicating the fact that I can be the leader. And then secondly, I wanted that to result in me being elected as the group leader. Well, Judge, I'm happy to say that evidence two, sorry, I've got so many papers here, Judge. Evidence two is my weekly log that I've kept across the 10 weeks. And you will notice that in week 3, when the students were put into groups and we had to elect a leader, I've logged in week 3 that I was nominated the leader. So Judge, I start by the opening statement that I am a leader. I've been informed by a number of leadership principles from my past, and I've succeeded to be nominated as a leader in my group. Right, so what I've done right now in this court of evidence is I've created a hook, and the hook is leadership. So I have up on the wall a hook called leadership. I have already placed some evidence onto that hook. One of those is key sources that have informed me. I've written about that. but I've then confirmed the influence of that character leadership in the fact that I was nominated the group leader. And so I've hung my evidence onto that hook. But did you notice another skill that I mentioned? I mentioned the fact that I convinced my group to nominate me as their group leader. That's assertive skills. And so, as having done that in terms of assertive skills, I've created another hook upon which I've hung my evidence of leadership. Apologize, we seem to have people breaking into the court. It's very, very, very controversial. So, Judge, if I may continue, another key influence that I've had in my life is a book by Stephen Covey, as thick as this one, where he talks about seeking first to understand and then to be understood. What that made me aware of, Judge, in terms of leadership, is that leadership is not just about leading or getting your way. Leadership is also about group dynamics. It's about understanding how to get the best out of your group, recognizing their strengths, their weaknesses, their personality types, their leadership skills. Now, in this project and in this module, this leadership module that I'm a part of, I'm a leader of leaders. That's a challenge and that's a task. And so again, I'm inspired by Stephen Covey, who says we need to keep our swords sharp. So what he basically says and is implying is that in terms of leadership, you always got to stay ahead. You've got to keep reading, you've got to keep listening, you've got to keep looking, you've got to keep developing that skill of leadership. So I've already mentioned that for me, leading by example, or the other term, leadership is influence, formed within me what's called character leadership. But I'm inspired by people like Nelson Mandela. Had all the right, in a sense, as he was released from prison, to be bitter and angry and revengeful. But he wasn't. What a leader. And I read a book entitled A Tale of Three Kings. This is me keeping my sword sharp, my development in leadership, my continuing development in leadership. And in this book, it tells a story about three kings. And one king was a very weak king. He threw spears at his subordinates. But one of his subordinates became king, and he got faced with a situation in which he then asked the question, shall I now throw spears? In other words, how will I respond now that I am a leader? Will I follow the bad example that other leaders have shown me? And so I would like to suggest that in terms of my own skill development, I have developed the art and skill of not just character leadership, but also leadership that does not respond or react to negativity, but responds or reacts in a way that you do not throw spears. It's called servant leadership, and it's looking to draw out the best in other people. So what I've just done there is I've just hooked another hook onto my wall, and it talks about the skill of leadership within groups. Find a term if you want about that. And so I've began to give evidence of how I'm developing in that particular way. Now, I've got the hook up on the wall. What evidence am I going to provide on that hook? Keep watching. So, Judge, how do I get the best out of other people in terms of leadership? Well, I've done what's called the DISC management profile. And on this particular management tool, I've discovered that I'm an I. I have very good interpersonal skills. I've then observed my group. I've used the method of observation, and I've observed my group in terms of their body language, in terms of the things they say, and the way they respond to tasks, and the way they respond to people. And I've been able to roughly guesstimate where they are on the DISC. Not so that I can label them or pigeonhole them, Judge, but so that I can get the best out of them, so that I know how to respond to them. Seek first to understand and then to be understood, said Stephen Covey. And so in my, Judge, let me just find the evidence for you. In my, here we go, my critical incident log. We had a situation, don't forget, I'm in this particular project, I'm a leader among leaders. We had some really, really strong characters, and conflict arose. One person wanted their way, and the other person did not want them to have their way. I recognized the person who wanted to have their way was the D on the DISC, very domineering. They wanted to get the task finished. But the person resisting was an S for stability. They were concerned about the dynamics of the group and what this decision would have on the group. And so I stepped in as the leader of leaders in this particular project to negotiate between these two personalities, to ensure that the D still got what they wanted in terms of the task, but to ensure that the S could be persuaded that the group dynamics would not change by increasing the socializing of the group and the trust among the group. And so I give you that evidence in my critical incident log in terms of how I responded to this incident and how I resolved the incident. So we're still just in the area of leadership, but what I've just done is I've created another context, another hook called conflict resolution. And I've given evidence in my critical incident log. I've hung it up on my hook. So this is what we need to do in terms of a portfolio of evidence. We need to create a context, which is the hook we're creating. We're then able to provide evidence to that context of the skills we have developed. I hope that's helpful. I hope it clarifies how the portfolio of evidence works. Thank you.